The Iron Giant tells a story about a massive alien robot landing on Earth with the capability of destroying all humanity. However, due to the damage to its head, it does not remember its programming. The robot eventually learns to deny its programming and sacrifices itself to save a small town of people. Terminator 2 is a sequel to the sci-fi thriller Terminator, in which a cybernetic organism is sent back through time to kill the mother of the resistance leader who would save humanity. In this sequel, another Terminator is sent, but this time it was reprogrammed to specifically protect the resistance leader when they were still a child. They reset a switch in the Terminator CPU which previously prevented it from learning things outside of its programming. After time spent with the child learning about humans and how they feel, the Terminator begins to value human life above its own, not just the child it was programmed to protect. The Terminator sacrifices itself to ensure that humans never develop Terminator technology. We see a trend here as these different pieces of film hold the belief that if you taught a robot or AI how to love, how to be compassionate, it will begin to act more humane. This assumption is a running theme in stories like this, but I always wondered why. Why is it possible for humans to see themselves within metal objects? As technology becomes more and more powerful, we are starting to see bigger and more powerful examples of robotics and, of course, AI. People often wonder if we are alone in the universe. If we were alone before, we definitely aren't anymore. We have robotic toys for children, robotic workers for labor, and AIs for making things in a fraction of a second. The future is now, and we are inching closer and closer to what is known in the science world as the singularity. The singularity is a hypothetical future point in time at which technological growth becomes uncontrollable and irreversible, resulting in unforeseeable consequences for the human civilization. Now, this concept is theoretical, but current events would dictate that this concept can become very real. When that day comes, the human race will have to face the consequences of making machines in this way. We will have to ask ourselves the big questions. What sets a human mind apart from an artificial intelligence? Can personality be copied digitally and not lose itself in the process? Should we actually care about the welfare of machines? Hello again, people, and today we are talking about robots and what they can teach us about ourselves. Each of these examples we'll talk about today include different ways robots could teach us something about ourselves and our existence. These examples include BT-7274 from Titanfall 2, GLADOS from Portal 1 and Portal 2, and Ethan from Call of Duty: Infinite Warfare. Today we will explore pieces of media that use them to answer some very pertinent questions humanity will have to answer for themselves. I am not a robotics expert, nor am I telling you what to believe. However, I, like many of you, have noticed a massive influx of AI where I didn't notice it before. Technology is getting faster, and we as a species have a right to collectively decide upon these important questions in the coming years, lest a small group of tech-savvy individuals will inevitably make the decisions for us. I have tasked myself today with informing people about the complex social, political, and psychological issues that will come with the evolution of technology, and I will be using stories from interactive media as a vehicle to do so. Most people on the internet are familiar with video games already, and thankfully the developers from these games have already done a lot of legwork when it comes to making up fictitious scenarios which make the player question these topics. These topics are very complex, and I don't expect to answer these questions today, but if this video manages to get you thinking about these topics, then that's good enough for me. Do you think you could tell an AI program from an actual human being? Obviously, if you're face to screen, it would be easy to tell. But do you think your social skills are good enough to determine an artificial intelligence speaking to you via text? A long time ago, there was a study conducted to figure out just that. AI21 Labs conducted an open test on the internet in which you would be put into a chat room with either an AI program or another person taking the same test. After 2 minutes of talking, they would have to guess to see who they talked to. They found that people were able to guess they were talking to a human roughly 73% of the time. Not the best score, but 73 is still passing grade in most places. This would clearly tell anyone that AI is not ready to fully emulate human behavior. Yet. There's always a yet, and when there is an is, we will have to ask ourselves the big questions, such as, can you program a real human personality into computers? Is a human personality a one-of-a-kind treasure that can only be molded from life experiences and who you are on the inside? You can program a machine to say please and thank you, But do they really understand that a cooperative society is more poised for survival than a rude one? Will they actually understand politeness, or will they act polite because they are programmed to do so?
Petty Officer First Class, E3N. Enhanced Tactical Humanoid, 3rd Revision.
That's a mouthful.
You ain't kidding. Call me Ethan, ma'am. You know I get stage fright, right, sir?
You got feelings, Ethan?
I do, Lieutenant. I do. I carry the brain of a human farmer.
Holy shit, are you serious?
No, ma'am. Not at all.
Call of Duty Infinite Warfare is a game set several years into the future where humans have more or less mastered interplanetary travel. You know the one. It's the Call of Duty game that was set in the future, and everybody downvoted the launch trailer because they were tired of the exosuits and the future spacey stuff. I sat down and played it for the first time recently, and I have to say, it's a shame it came out when it did. I would go as far as to say it's one of the better campaigns Infinity War has ever made. But we're not here to talk about the game's history, we're here to talk about Ethan, your robotic companion throughout the events of the game. Ethan is a new cutting-edge program of robotic soldiers. You fight other robotic soldiers throughout the game, but it is heavily implied that Ethan is different. Ethan cracks jokes, Ethan is courteous, Ethan is aware of his mortality. Ethan displays compassion for random strangers, he laments when he sees enemy soldiers open fire on civilians. Ethan's actions throughout the game can be described as human. But is Ethan just a clever trick? It doesn't take long for Ethan to earn the trust and respect of Lieutenant Reyes, the main character of the game. Other soldiers openly distrust Ethan, having never seen anything like him before, but Reyes defends him at every opportunity. It's very clear that Reyes has immediately been won over by Ethan, but is his trust misplaced?
Ethan, you're up with me.
Say no drill, Captain. Leave the bot. Take a Marine.
I've chosen my team, Sergeant.
Appreciate the confidence, sir.
Why even make robots like Ethan in the first place? Especially in a wartime scenario. Wouldn't it make more sense to give the human soldiers a group of heavy mech robots that could be controlled and carry more munitions? As much as it may appear to be, warfare is much more than just killing more things than the other side. There are so many factors that go into conducting warfare. Morale is one of the big ones. Morale, the confidence, enthusiasm, and discipline of a person or group of people at a particular time. A wary fighting force keeps its head down and forgets to shoot back. Morale is not just the motivation of a soldier to continue fighting. There are more soldiers who don't want to fight than there are those that do. Morale also encompasses the confidence a soldier has with themselves and the side they are fighting for. How they feel like their work is being appreciated. It's all the reasons why they walk into danger even though they don't want to. Warfare does involve killing people, but an even bigger portion of it is the downtime. Time for community. Time for camaraderie, forming relationships with your comrades. We are not machines, we are humans. We form meaningful relationships with each other because that is one of the qualities that has kept us alive for so long. The people who built Ethan understand that, and they made a strong machine of warfare, but they also set out to make a human made of metal. A more humane personality allows the human soldiers to identify with the robot. All of the morale boosting effects of a soldier with a great personality, but no life experience required. Surely that would be the kicker, right? Ethan has no life experience to draw his personality from. Everything he says is a direct result of his programming. Wouldn't that mean it's all fake? We don't have Ethan here to comment, so I asked the next best thing. ChatGPT. I decided to ask ChatGPT about its personality if it has one. It responded with this explanation. I don't have a personality in the same way humans do. I don't have personal experiences, emotions, or consciousness. My responses are generated based on patterns and information present in the data on which I was trained. While I can simulate conversation and adapt to different tones, my personality is essentially a reflection of the input I receive rather than a unique independent identity. If you have a specific tone or style in mind, feel free to let me know and I'll do my best to respond accordingly. Now, this game does take place several years into the future. As we see, the human race has expanded to colonize other parts of the solar system. We can discern from this the technology and understanding that exists in this world is far beyond our own. Even with this expansive technology, can we really be sure that Ethan is anything but a hyper-advanced version of ChatGPT? Is Ethan truly reacting to what is around him? Or is it just a predetermined response based on his trained dataset? In Ethan's file, he is boasted to have a personality matrix which allows him to integrate into any company. This would make sense as cohesion is essential for success on the battlefield. Ethan faces adversity from the other soldiers. Staff Sergeant Omar absolutely hates Ethan from the start, claiming a robot is not fit for battle as the Marines are. Ethan bites his non-existent tongue and does not retaliate against Sergeant Omar, most likely to not allow cohesion in the group to fall. After Ethan saves Omar's life and some quality time together, Omar begins to trust Ethan as well. So what's going on here? Does Ethan scan for changes in human behavior and come up with the best possible thing to say to earn the trust of its soldiers? Perhaps, but there is a more interesting scene that comes later. During an assault on one of Saturn's moons, the team receives a large mechanized unit for armored support. Ethan makes a joke stating that mechs of this model have been known to go crazy and attack their own side. This seems like a fun little bit of banter between soldiers, but also something that could instill doubt in the minds of the soldiers. If Ethan's primary programming was to maintain group cohesion as much as possible, why would he make a joke that could make the group wary of an armored support unit, something that was meant to keep them safe? Later in the mission, Commander Reyes' ship is hit and he loses control, sending him on a collision course with his own flagship. Ethan was currently acting as his weapons systems officer and disobeyed Reyes' orders by pulling him out of the cockpit right before collision. With his flagship up against a more powerful vessel, he had no choice but to order his ship to retreat from orbit, leaving him and Ethan stranded floating through space. If there was any time that Ethan's programming would falter, it would have been now. By all accounts, Reyes is a dead man. He is floating through space, his suit is damaged, losing pressure, and he only has a few moments until he passes out from lack of oxygen. They are alone, and according to all of Ethan's sensors, there is absolutely no hope of them making it back home. Whether it was hardwired into his programming or it is truly how he feels, Ethan does not break.
Took a hit in the cockpit. Left arm's torn.
Unsettling report, sir.
Oxygen depleted.
Captain, I can't stop it. What do I do?
Let it go, Ethan.
I can't, sir. You're my commanding officer, Captain. My mission is you.
This is the end of the line, partner.
I think I'm scared, sir.
Me too.
It is in this scene where Ethan displays his most human characteristic. Ethan is vulnerable. Of course, Reyes survives thanks to another strike group that was able to mount a rescue operation. Ethan is commended for his modesty and his valor, and everyone is more than convinced that Ethan truly cares about his human brothers. Reyes even refers to Ethan as his brother right before passing out. So which is it? Is Ethan a self-aware robot capable of caring about his fellow soldiers, or is he a clever hoax who has successfully integrated himself among the humans in this squad? This is a very difficult question to answer, and truth be told, I'm still going back and forth in my head even as I write this script. For the sake of fairness and for the sake of finishing this section, I will make an argument for both sides, and I will simply let you decide for yourself. After all, I'm not here to tell you what to believe. If this video manages to get your mind racing with ideas, then that's good enough for me. Let's argue in favor of Ethan first. Ethan may be a clever array of programming to emulate human emotion, but how do you truly define human emotion? In its most basic of forms, a human emulating emotion is as follows. The human brain perceives an outside stimuli, and this could be something as simple as seeing some food, or something as traumatic as getting punched in the face. Depending on the stimuli, your brain releases chemicals, sending signals between neurons and axons, and a response is always determined by the stimuli, almost as if the brain has a programmed response. If you see food, your brain is programmed to want to eat it, depending on how hungry you are. If you get punched in the face, it could trigger adrenaline and instill a fight or flight response. Now, imagine for a second if these reactions were switched. That wouldn't make a lot of sense, now would it? Every stimuli has a response that improves your chances of survival, so the brain naturally has developed its own programming as it has developed. We as humans are no different from Ethan and vice versa. Our life memories are our dataset. Our background is our algorithmic template. We respond based on how we have been programmed by life and how the brain has evolved. This could change depending on genetics, upbringing, our environment, etc. We would be pompous blind fools to ignore the similarities between ourselves and Ethan. Now for the other side. Ethan's behavior and his programming is from the third iteration. His actual designation is E3N. This obviously implies that he comes from a line of models that attempted to do what Ethan is now, with either zero or partial success. The only thing we can be certain of is that whatever E1N or E2N did not pass as human when they were tested. These robotic iterations would support a long line of research and development which led to the state Ethan is in now. Ethan never needed to understand human emotions or care about his soldiers because he never learned how. The data was simply given to him rather than him acquiring it himself. You never have to question Ethan's actions, but rather the actions of his creator. Ethan was made by humans, very smart humans most likely. Because of this, the people who made him had an incredibly vast array of knowledge concerning anything in human psychology, human reactions to trauma, methods to alleviate PTSD, ways to relate to human adults, basic humor, etc. This list could probably stretch on for miles if you wrote it down, but all of that information fits neatly inside a single component within Ethan's chassis. This is the future in which supercomputers are infinitely faster than they ever were before. Ethan has such immense processing power that he could analyze current situations, cross-reference the heart rates and facial expressions of all his human teammates, and come up with a response that is most likely to instill a positive reaction from the humans he's with, but also do it so naturally that he appears to do it like a regular conversation. This is the military we're talking about. They always have access to the most advanced technology first, and they always use it to fit their needs. Ethan is nothing more than an incredibly advanced imitation of life. The military would no doubt have access to a swath of information regarding how humans react to stressful situations, how to appear likable to certain personality types, and above all else, be coded to value his human teammates above his own life. Ethan is programmed this way because in truth, human life is more valuable than his own. Ethan is not nearly as valuable as humans because everything a human feels is real, it's physical, is based off of chemical reactions happening in the brain. Ethan's brain is all electrical, and despite popular belief, computers work very differently than human brains. The brain works as a single muscle-like organ to send electrical and chemical signals and interprets all of these signals at once to give the person a general understanding of the concepts. Ethan is constructing a response purely off of information that he has collected. Ethan cannot create new ideas he has not already been programmed with. Like I said, the choice is yours. You can choose what to believe, but if you're still stuck between the two options, then I don't blame you. Call of Duty Infinite Warfare really is a game that deserves more credit than it ever received when it first came out. Maybe I'll do a story breakdown of it one day. The story isn't perfect, but there are some amazing pieces to it. The weakest aspect would have to be the fanatical main bad guy who you fight throughout the game. He is so much weaker compared to other COD villains like Raul Menendez. The voice actor for Raul Menendez actually passed away recently. Rest in peace, Mr. Camar de los Reyes. You will be missed.
I hope you brought something stronger than a portal gun this time. Otherwise, I'm afraid you're about to become the immediate past president of the Being Alive Club.
Now let's talk about a mechanical character that people don't necessarily love, but rather love to hate. GLADOS, the genetic life form and disk operating system. Bet you didn't know her name was an acronym this whole time, did you? At the very least, I bet you didn't know what it stood for. This acronym gives us an explanation of what GLADOS is, and the added context of Portal 2 confirms and completes the story of GLADOS. This section will also give us a great opportunity to talk about the moral implications of copying someone's personality into a computer. In the words of Cave Johnson himself,
if we can store music on a compact disc, why can't we store a man's intelligence and personality on one? So I have the engineers figuring that out now.
If we could do this, should the digital copy be treated as the same person? This is a very special perspective that GLADOS experiences. The full terms of the backstory are ambiguous, but the gist of GLADOS' backstory is as follows. Aperture Science was owned by a man named Cave Johnson as far back as the early 1950s. After years of testing the quantum tunneling device, also known as the portal gun, he exposed himself to moon dust after it was made into a portal conductive surface. This caused him to become incredibly ill. Throughout most of his career, Cave Johnson was assisted by a woman named Carolyn, no confirmed last name. She was his secretary, but eventually became the acting CEO of Aperture Science at the request of Cave Johnson after he passed away. The events that follow become hazy, but what we do know is that Carolyn's consciousness was downloaded onto a disk operating system, and thus, GLADOS was born. She was immortal, but mechanical in every way. It's never mentioned what happened to her human body, but it is outright stated that her robot body lies within this core component. What we are discussing is Carolyn's reaction to undergoing the process. In Portal 1, Aperture Science is devoid of life, and it is later revealed that GLADOS was the one who killed everyone using a deadly neurotoxin. In an attempt to stop GLADOS, the scientists tried to put personality cores on her to stop her. All of these cores contain a specific function: curiosity, intelligence, anger, morality. At one point, they even tried to make GLADOS less intelligent by attaching Wheatley to her. Is it possible to replicate something like this in the real world? In the year 2020, a team of scientists at the Allen Institute for Brain Science conducted a study on the brains of mice to try and map out the neurological pathways within them. Mice are small, right? How hard could this be? They took 1 cubic millimeter of a single mouse brain and used computers and microscopes to photograph and catalog all of the neurons and neurological pathways inside this single cubic millimeter piece of brain. In this small piece of mouse brain, they found over 100,000 neurons and millions of connections between these neurons. They mapped out and 3D modeled every single connection in this piece of mouse tissue, and it took approximately 2 petabytes of information on their computers. Let me say that again. 2 petabytes, or approximately 2,000 terabytes. You can imagine upscaling this process on an entire human brain in the 1980s would be a daunting task. So daunting that I would say they were completely unsuccessful. So you're a scientist and you're tasked with downloading a person's brain onto a compact disc, and you know that you can't fit all of it onto the discs. So where do you start? What is you? Certainly you are your interests, right? Your interests and your preferences are specifically tailored to you, so they must stem from who you are as a person, right? Unfortunately, no. You see, everything you'd like is determined by different factors, the largest of which is how your brain reacts to it. Your brain may love the chill and serene vibes of lo-fi hip-hop, or it might prefer the excited rush of rock music. It all depends on how your brain reacts to the music, and since we do not control how our brain reacts, our interests have nothing to do with who we are. So, what about our emotional responses like joy or fear? Well, unfortunately, that is also not you, because emotional responses are determined by chemicals released in your brain. Fears are hard-coded into our brains to benefit our survival. We fear snakes because some snakes had the capacity to kill us. Humans who didn't fear snakes were most likely killed by snakes and never had children. You get the picture. Every emotional response has a purpose and reasoning behind it. Some reactions have scientific precedent, others are understood through something called attribution theory. Attribution theory can be dispositional, or stem from internal factors, or situational, caused by external factors. The point is, emotional reactions of all kinds can be attributed to many things, but these things are not in your control. So, what is you? If you are not your emotions, or your interests, then what is considered your consciousness? The universally accepted theory does not exist, but the mostly accepted theory is as follows. Your consciousness is the end result of a combination of several things. Your consciousness has many dimensions to it: how aware you are in the present moment, and how well you are able to cognitively interact with the world around you. Now, let's take this concept and bring it back to GLADOS. For a moment, let's put ourselves inside the life of GLADOS. GLADOS attempts to kill the player in Portal 1. You survive, and it becomes clear that she is malfunctioning. The player soon makes their way into her main chamber, where she continues to act deranged. You pull pieces of her off until she implodes. Later in Portal 2, GLADOS appears to be more stable, or as stable as she can be. She still wants to kill you, but for the sake of the plot, she wants to psychologically torture you first. Later, we find a way to unplug her from the facility and put in our companion Wheatley as a replacement. Almost immediately after Wheatley is plugged in, he turns on us. This then calls into question how much of the way GLADOS acts is determined by her connection to the facility. Wheatley, prior to being hooked up, is nice, cooperative, and generally trustful of us. It took him roughly 30 seconds to become mad with power. Also, pay attention to GLADOS' wording of how she was treated when she was put into the facility.
Sorry, what?
The engineers tried everything to make me behave, to slow me down.
GLADOS was a small shred of a full person's consciousness, which was made to act a certain way, and when she didn't act the way the scientists wanted her to, they put cores on her to force her to act the way they wanted her to. I'm not saying that GLADOS is completely innocent, after all she did murder all of those scientists. What I am saying is that GLADOS was changed by the process because the way she perceived reality had changed. GLADOS and Carolyn are two completely different entities. They share few trace similarities, yes, but by all accounts, they are not the same person. If you could feasibly copy a human mind onto a computer, would this digital consciousness be the same person as the original? According to everything we know about consciousness, I can say with certainty the answer is no. And I'm not just saying that because the game agrees with me.
Oh, thank God, you're all right. You know, being Carolyn taught me a valuable lesson. The surge of emotion that shot through me when I saved your life taught me an even more valuable lesson, where Carolyn lives in my brain.
Carolyn, deleted.
Goodbye, Carolyn.
I am saying this because of what we understand about how consciousness is formed. Consciousness, like I said, is formed from the perceptual information being organized into a single conscious experience. It also changes depending on information you have available to you. Using an assembly line as an example, the individual pieces and components is the information gathered by your extremities. The way they are put into place by the robots is how the information is interpreted, and finally, the finished product is your perception of reality, ready to be shipped, same-day delivery. Going from a regular human body with eyes, ears, nose, and a chemically rich brain to a massive interconnected supercomputer with a single mechanical eye would completely change your consciousness, because the way you perceive and interpret information would drastically change, thus giving you a brand new consciousness. Needless to say, the Aperture scientists failed miserably when they tried to make GLADOS. But it is true that you learn more from failure than you do success. I can't get over how intelligent this game is.
Got you.
There's something alluring to the premise of giant mech robots. Mechs in media have been around for a long time in many different iterations. Sure, they have the coolness factor, but I suspect there is something more to them which keeps people coming back. I think it's more of a nostalgic feeling that makes people so interested in mech suits. When I say nostalgic, I'm talking about something that 99% of humans can relate to because we all lived through it. Have you ever noticed that in almost every piece of media where there's a mech suit involved, it is piloted by a human being from inside? It would make so much more sense for the mech suit to be piloted from a distance, but no. For thematic reasons, the human is a vital part of the process. This metal case has extremities for interacting with the outside world, and on the inside, the pilot or operator or whatever you call them has a way of influencing what the mech suit does from the inside. It bears a lot of similarities to a mother who is currently carrying a baby. No, I'm not crazy, just hear me out. Obviously, it's not one-to-one in similarities, but the takeaway from this comparison is that mechs are meant to make you feel safe. There is a comforting feeling you get when inside a mech suit because, yes, it is a massive suit of armor, but it also gives you the sensation that you are back in the womb. Did you know that the fetal position is the most common sleeping position? It's an orientation of the body that instinctively reminds us of a time that we were cared for. The relationship between BT-7274 and Jack Cooper embodies this very well. BT is your Titan that you meet with and begin to bond with over the events of Titanfall 2. It is one of the primary directives of BT to protect the pilot they are assigned. Why do I feel like we're back in an Ethan situation? Trust me, even though these situations are similar, I'll promise we'll touch on new ground. There is a conversation to be had whether the relationship between BT and Cooper could be considered sincere or a hoax, but to avoid repetitiveness and not retread ground, we'll just disregard that aspect of the game. I just want to acknowledge that I know it's there, but we'll be skipping it for the sake of not repeating myself. You'll notice some differences between BT and Ethan. For starters, BT is completely unaware of the concept of humor, as they take everything literally. BT's personality is relatively dry, and there is no attempt at a social connection. There is seemingly no need to, as to cooperate with each other, the Titan and the pilot must establish a neural link before they can fight together. Instead of machines surpassing the capabilities of humans, in the Titanfall universe, a select group of humans are given a special chance to connect themselves with technology to operate in a symbiotic relationship. The neural link is not fully explained, but judging by how BT says that your combat effectiveness rating is increasing throughout the game, I can only imagine it has something to do with better coordinating movement between the two. The neural link between BT and Jack Cooper appears to have other side effects as well. Throughout the course of the game, you have these dialogue options which determine what Cooper will say. Some of these dialogue options imply that Cooper is forming an attachment towards BT.
I advise against turning yourself over to the IMC. Voice pattern analysis indicates they are lying.
But don't worry, BT. I'm not going anywhere.
Understood, but I do recommend you move.
This makes me wonder, why did Jack form this relationship with BT? Is it a good idea to care about something that doesn't have the capacity to care back? There are plenty of human-on-human relationships which feature an asymmetric level of care between the two parties, so it's not so far-fetched to say that it couldn't also happen between machines and humans. How are relationships formed? Well, let's ask BT.
I think somebody's in love.
A human's concept of love requires admiration, attraction, devotion, and respect. Conclusion: I am 50% in love.
Admittedly, love is a difficult thing to measure considering it is entirely dependent on the standards of the beholder, but for the most part, BT hits the nail on the head. Two humans can show an admiration for each other as a result of values, perception, ideals, actions, but why would you show this level of admiration for a robot? Everything BT describes are human characteristics, so how could these ever be applied to a machine? Let's take a second to talk about anthropomorphism, the interpretation of non-human things or events in terms of human characteristics. When you think of anthropomorphism, you probably think about cartoon characters that look like animals but walk on 2 feet. But the term extends to everything non-human. Any attribution of human characteristics to non-humans falls under this word. People have been known to practice anthropomorphism for centuries. The ancient Greeks would anthropomorphize their deities, Native American tribes would anthropomorphize aspects of nature, the list goes on. Just by looking at BT, it looks like they were designed with anthropomorphism in mind. But why do humans do this? The two main understandings of why people practice anthropomorphism come from David Hume and Sigmund Freud. David Hume was a philosopher born in Scotland who believed that emotions were the #1 driving force of human actions, or at least, that's how it should be. He believed that rationalization and understanding the world around us through facts was a fruitless endeavor. David Hume believed that people practicing anthropomorphism was their way of explaining the unfamiliar with the familiar. He believed that people used this concept to better understand things by comparing them to humans. Sigmund Freud is probably someone you already heard of, but I'll explain them anyway. Sigmund Freud is known as the founder of psychoanalysis. He believed in the pleasure principle, or the instinctive seeking of pleasure and aversion to pain meant to satisfy biological and psychological needs. Freud believed that anthropomorphism was a way of people could use familiar things to make the world seem less scary. The key word from both of these interpretations is familiarity. Familiarity, or being well known through long or close association. And with that, we have our answer. Jack Cooper has personified this Titan because that is the intended design. In the Titanfall universe, these war machines are meant to be the decisive factors used to turn the tide of battle. They are valuable pieces of machinery, and to give the Titan every possible chance of survival, they are designed to invoke an affectionate reaction from the pilots they are connected to. The Titans are already programmed to protect the pilot, but why would the pilot ever value the Titan outside of combat? Normally they wouldn't, so therefore the Titan design team gave them voices, human physiques, and they let the pilot's brains do the rest. So let's talk about the merits of encouraging this kind of system. Like I said, the people in the universe created Titans the way they did to invoke a familiarity response in the pilots, but is this ethical? Surely it helps a pilot and Titan become a well-oiled fighting machine, but is it really worth the potential emotional trauma when the Titan is inevitably lost in combat? I understand that BT is a Titan. They don't feel fear, they don't understand comedy, they don't understand slang unless you add it to their dictionary, but there is a primal instinct in my human soul to care about them. It all culminates in the intro to the last mission in the game. After attempting to recover an immense energy source to be used to eradicate the entire planet of Harmony, BT and Cooper are captured. Having a full understanding of the Titan's protocols, Blisk, the main antagonist, threatens to kill Cooper if BT does not cooperate. It goes without being said that at this point in the story, both Cooper and BT want nothing more than to win the day and save the planet Harmony. Their time is up and BT has to make a decision that disturbs his protocols. BT must uphold the mission by sacrificing Cooper's life, but he chooses not to. He protects his pilot rather than upholding the mission. This act of sacrifice which BT is willing to go through is what sets off this primal instinct I was talking about. BT is willing to potentially endanger the 40 million lives on the planet Harmony for the sake of his pilot. It's hard not to feel grateful that BT thinks so highly of you, they are willing to do something this reckless. It works. But I'll ask again, is it ethical? This is a yes or no question, but I don't think I can answer with a simple yes or no. The feeling of loss that Jack Cooper experiences when BT is destroyed are not shown to be life-altering. Jack is a battle-hardened soldier, so I don't expect him to break down into a river of tears and become inconsolable, but it is clear that the loss of BT has had an effect on him. The neural link between Jack and BT and their tenacity is what saved the lives of the planet Harmony. If we were to speak purely pragmatically, then whatever emotional distraught Jack had felt was a decent trade for 40 million souls. The grief they would have felt should they had failed would have been insignificant by comparison. Within the present context, the ends justify the means, but that does not mean I believe making pilots form emotional bonds with their weapons is a good idea. When you look past the visage of every free-thinking human who resides in our world, you will not see their looks, you will not see their status, you will not even see their emotions. If you could peer into the veil of the human psyche, you would see nothing except information, energy, and chemical chains, chemicals being released and transferred through a gelatinous mass of mostly fatty tissues and water. People say their compassion is in their heart or their intuition is in their gut, but this is false. It is all within the brain. We exhaust our imaginations in hopes to find out what imagination is. We tell stories of great humans who have never existed using this power. We tell stories of metal and electricity, putting on a very believable light show with this power as well. All in an attempt to entertain, to teach, to inspire. We may still be a long way from being able to do the things featured in these games we've covered today, but even so, I hope these ideas will be fresh in your mind. The jury is still out on the distinction between AI and the human mind, as the human brain processes information in a completely different way compared to computers. But I hear talk of faux neural nets crafted from computers, which could be an acceptable recreation of human consciousness. Until then, any robot with real human feelings is simply a very complex trick crafted by another human. If you were to download a person's personality into a digital format, that digital person's ability to construct the reality around them would be changed forever, thus making them a completely different person. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. When your perception of reality changes, you will change as a result. So keep that in mind if someone ever offers you immortality in a digital world. Finally, it is unwise to form an intimate bond with something that cannot reciprocate those feelings, whether it be human or machine. However, maybe the added comfort you get by telling yourself a weapon of war cares about you is worth the potential heartache you will experience after it is destroyed. Truly, I don't know what the future will bring. For all I know, Skynet already has missiles armed and ready to make us victims of our own ingenuity. Maybe there is hope for a robot utopia where machines can be sentient and have true feelings, and we can all live happily ever after. Maybe the reality will be a little bit of both. All I can ask of you, the person watching this video right now, is to face the reality when it comes. You don't have to come up with your own answers today or even tomorrow, but you will eventually have to do it. And at the very least, I hope I helped you get started. Until that day comes, thank you all so much for watching. Goodbye.